Welcome back to my channel, I'm Johnny, and let's break down the ending and post-credits scene of Venom: The Last Dance, the finale of Tom Hardy's Venom trilogy, but the Eureka opened door to a wider universe of symbiotes. Spoiler warning before I continue. The third Venom film has two post-credits scenes, one with Null and another with the aftermath of Area 51, both of them coming after a final battle filled it with symbiotes. To best contextualize how this film ends, I really just have to quickly recap the full plot of the movie. In Venom: The Last Dance, Andy Serkis plays Null, the symbiote god, whose children, the symbiotes, have imprisoned him after a past conflict. Frozen to a throne with his hands wrapped around his sword, all black, the Necrosword, he opens portals to send the Xenophage across the universe to locate the Codex, which is a metaphysical link formed between a symbiote and their host that connects back to the symbiote hive mind, and getting a hold of this will give Null a key to escape his bondage. When Venom brought Eddie back from death in the past, they formed this Codex when they merge into their shared form. So transported back to the 688 universe after the events of Spider-Man: No Way Home, they make their way from Mexico toward New York to re-establish Eddie after apparently a corrupt judge he was investigating ran him out of town, which is why he was in San Francisco to begin with. Meanwhile, Area 51 is being decommissioned, but secretly Area 55 is fully active under the Imperium program. So in the Marvel Comics, the brood symbiote Imperium refers to the hive of symbiotes that were created by Null from the living abyss to consume planets and destroy civilizations. Teddy Payne, played by Juno Temple, who is haunted by the memory of her brother Thaddeus dying after she was struck by lightning from a desert storm while they were holding hands and the current flowed into him, killing him. Together, these two characters form a reference to Thaddeus Payne, a scientist who experimented on Venom in the comics. Also under the Imperium program is General Rex Strickland at Chiwetel Ejiofor, who leads a military strike force hunting down the symbiotes who have sought safe haven on Earth over the years. Along with another scientist, Sadie, they interview Detective Mulligan, Stephen Graham, coming back from Venom: Let There Be Carnage, who has been bonded with the symbiote now known as Toxin. And Toxin warns them about Null coming to Earth, saying, "The darkness has teeth," which is reference to a great line that the Abyss has teeth in Donny Cates' King in Black comic storyline. They learn that the Codex tracker on Eddie and Venom can be broken by either Eddie or Venom dying. Now, one of the more interesting things about this film is that General Strickland reports to some shadowy figure who's monitoring various world security feeds. We do not see this figure's face, and he's presented as a mystery villain, but we never figure out who this is. The figure was not listed in the movie's credits. Maybe they intended this figure to be the General, played by Martin McDougall, who clears Eddie's record in the hospital room at the end of the movie. But this mystery man silhouette and his voice seemed way younger. We should also note that Reed Scott is listed in this movie's credits, despite Dr. Dan never appearing in this film after his roles in the first two films. I will say this mystery man to me kind of sounds like Reed Scott. So while I was watching this film, it seemed like either they were setting something up for him, or maybe they were setting up this universe's Norman Osborn. I don't know. It seems like they had something else in mind for this character, and then maybe they had to change this plan late in production, and then they just brought in Martin McDougall to play the General to just kind of, close the book on this arc in the final scene. While I was getting vibes of Oscorp here, or maybe Horizon or Alchemax or something like that, this figure with the trim suit, the calm voice, and the monotone colors of these inserts could be Mr. Negative, a villain Spider-Man fans have been wanting to see for a long time on film, especially after his popular appearances in games. Mr. Negative has an alter ego as Mr. Positive, aka Martin Lee, a Chinese gangster turned philanthropist, and maybe the Chinese connection could actually explain why Sony, who is totally counting on Chinese box office performance for this film, might have had to awkwardly omit an explicit reveal of this character. But throughout Venom: The Last Dance, Eddie and Venom have to stay separated to evade Xenophage hunting them down. They also have to evade Strickland's security forces trying to catch them. In the desert, they join up with a family of Martin, Rhys Ifans, a conspiracy theorist hoping to see Area 51 before it closes. And yes, Rhys Ifans did play Dr. Connors, the Lizard, in The Amazing Spider-Man and in Spider: No Way Home. But they join this family and learn some valuable life lessons while singing some David Bowie and get to Las Vegas, where Eddie and Venom steal a tuxedo from a guy who pees on his feet and run into Mrs. Chen and have a great time gambling and dancing. And then Eddie and Venom get captured by General Strickland's forces and taken to Area 51. So the final battle of this movie is a symbiote house party that mixes new symbiote designs with a few specific symbiote cameos. General Strickland plans to shoot Eddie to end the Codex problem, to stop the Codex that they share from bringing Null to Earth, also as a bit of payback for Eddie having to kill one of Strickland's soldiers earlier in the film. But then the scientist Sadie, wearing a Christmas tree brooch for whatever reason, sneaks Venom out of, and Venom pops out from Sadie and protects Eddie, and then a xenophage arrives and chows down, eating Toxin. And I love the design of these things because they're like walking wood chippers that just blow the blood out the back of their heads. To fight these xenophage, Sadie does all of us a favor by releasing all of the symbiotes that are in containment. One bonds to her and forms a green symbiote with red streaks and tendrils. This is Lasher, who takes his form on a girl named Sadie in the 2019 Absolute Carnage comics storyline. And using the red and green color coding of this symbiote, we can apply this to the other symbiotes that we see in the tanks earlier in the film. So I assume some of the other ones we see in this brawl include Scream and Phage, who along with Riot and Agony form the 5 in the Life Foundation comic storyline. It's hard because we mostly just have their color to go on at this part of the movie. They aren't otherwise identified. We see another symbiote binding with the security guard, who remember checked Dr. Payne in earlier in the film, forming a kind of pudgy stout symbiote. Another Imperium scientist, the female colleague that Sadie told to call her family, bonds with a symbiote forming a pale color that somewhat looks like the anti-Venom, but she also looked a bit purple or periwinkle in the light, so she might also be Scorn. At one point, 2 symbiotes just decide to jump into each other to form a multi-headed symbiote that could be based on Hybrid, which is a symbiote that forms from the fusion of Agony, Lasher, Phage, Riot, and Scream. So the melee spills out onto the ground outside, where Martin and his family have snuck in, hoping to get a glimpse of an alien. Eddie and Venom save this family from a collapsing guard tower, and the new symbiotes try to pin down one of the xenophage, but Strickland just blows them all up with an RPG, killing some of the symbiotes, but the xenophage recovers and emits a beacon to Null to send even more xenophage. Dr. Payne reveals that she has pocketed her own vial of symbiote sample that zaps with electricity and seems to feed from her residual electric current and her grief that she carries over her brother, and turns her into a purple symbiote with amazing flowing hair that I think must be Agony, though we should know that Agony is not known to have electric current powers in the comics. Eddie, luring all these xenophage away in a pretty cool motorcycle chase, gets severely wounded. And Venom decides to heal Eddie, and both of them head toward the acid shower that Strickland was using earlier in the film to dispose all of the Area 51 hardware. Venom, though, absorbs all the xenophage into his mass and spits out Eddie, protecting him with a metal hatch. Venom puppets Strickland to activate the acid shower to disintegrate himself and all of the xenophage, telling Eddie goodbye for now. Strickland gets hit with the acid and detonates a grenade to blow up the whole structure. Sadly, we never get to see Strickland become the Tyrannosaurus symbiote that he does in the comics. With Venom's death, Null is trapped once more. While this is a last dance between Eddie and Venom, this final battle filled the dance floor with a variety of symbiotes who now call Earth their home, and we can follow any number of them in a sequel film. Eddie recovers and the General clears his record. This implies that the corrupt Judge Eddie was investigating might have been pressured using evidence uncovered by the Imperium surveillance program. Eddie returns to New York City, and he finds flashes back to pleasant memories with Venom from the previous film, while we hear Maroon 5's memories. Eddie looks out at the Statue of Liberty, which he said earlier was a symbol of safe haven for lost souls seeking a new world. Really, though, it's the symbolic meaning of the statue. Eddie wants Earth to be a safe haven, a home for refugee symbiotes. The mid-credit scene returns to Null in the void. The camera moves up the hilt of his sword, all black, the Necro sword, as his hands are frozen on top of it, gripping it, and he says,
"Your champion has fallen. The planets will be mine. The King in Black is awake. I will kill your world. Everyone will burn. And you, well..."
Null, whose head has been bowed the entire film, his pale hair draped over his face, now raises his head so that we can see his fiery eyes and his mouth full of sharp teeth. What does it mean that the King in Black is awake? What future could this franchise have beyond Eddie Brock's Venom? Well, a bit of history on Null. Null's actually a pretty recent addition to Marvel Comics, introduced only in 2018, and Lord and Donny Cates' Amazing King in Black storyline from 2020 to 2021. Null comes from the destruction of the Sith iteration of the universe, and the Celestials tasked him to be what they called the King in Black to look after their creations. But the light of creation made him realize that his kingdom of darkness was being neglected, which led to him feeling bitter and forming his weapon and attacking the Celestials. In fact, his decapitation of one of these Celestials led to the comic version of Nowhere. Though in the MCU, that version of Nowhere was not created by Null, and the Celestials that we see in the MCU are not connected to this version of Null. In King in Black, Null seeks the Codex from Eddie Brock's son, Dylan Brock, leading to a full-on assault on Earth from Null's hive mind-controlled symbiote dragons, a crossover event that ties in the Avengers and the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, the Silver Surfer, really everybody. That culminates in an epic duel with Eddie Brock as he powers up into Captain Universe. Now, while this movie follows the piece of Venom's goo left in the Mexican bar in the 688 universe, there remains a parallel piece of Venom goo left in that bar in the 616 universe at the end of No Way Home. If that piece of Venom crawls its way over to Peter Parker in Spider-Man 4, it could create a separate codex that Null, in this chasm void between universes, could use to free himself and threaten Earth in the MCU with a swarm of symbiote dragons. It's just that this movie specifically says that this universe is surrounded by a dark abyss, suggesting that where Null is not in any one universe, but rather in a kind of buffer void that exists between universes. Tom Holland did say that he read a draft of Spider-Man 4, along with Zendaya confirming her involvement in this fourth film. Maybe MJ could get infected by the symbiote and be Null's target, and to defend her and to defend all of Earth from a symbiote assimilation, Peter Parker could have to acquire the powers of Captain Universe and fight Null one-on-one himself. This movie's director and co-writer Kelly Marcel told IGN, quote, "Trust me, I know full well how important Null is to the fans. So just as we laid a foundation for Venom, we hope we are doing the same for Null. The King in Black is way too powerful for one and done. This film introduces Null, but it just touches the beginnings of his story. Marvel's greatest film villains are developed over time. Now, if Null doesn't return in Spider-Man 4, this movie did leave us with Juno Temple as Agony and Clark Bacco as Lasher. Sony could follow one of them, or follow a true anti-Venom storyline set in this universe, or maybe just establish that this right here is the same universe as the Andrew Garfield Amazing Spider-Man universe, and let that version of Spider-Man have to deal with aliens for the first time. Now, the second post-credit scene returns to Area 51, the bartender played by Christopher Hernandez, Danny Rojas from Ted Lasso, in the No Way Home scene restaged for this film after it taken into custody by Rex Strickland's unit, emerges from a desert cave. He runs through the smoldering rubble, and then a cockroach crawls up to the broken vial that Teddy paints, smashed open to release the Agony symbiote. Electricity continues to zap through that broken glass, and the roach touches it, and we cut to black. So this is a reference to the earlier exchange between Dr. Payne and the Area 55 security guard, Jim. Dr. Payne mentions how roaches have survived all apocalyptic events on this planet and are still here even after 250 million years. The fact that the symbiote could now infect one of the oldest and most resilient life forms on this planet, I think it's just meant to suggest that Null's coming invasion of Earth will take place from the ground up of our ecosystem and animal kingdom. I want to know from you, what did you think about this film? How does Venom: The Last Dance rank for you among the other films in the trilogy? Comment down below with your thoughts. Subscribe for breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.